That's a picture of Apollo Hill, and we're going to talk about that. The company was listed in March 2018, and I'm going to talk to you about its journey so far, and most importantly, where we're going next. It is a heap leach gold project, so it is a little bit differentiated from a lot of the things you're going to see today. Location, heart of the Eastern Goldfields, about 2.5 hours drive north of Kalgoorlie. Key points on that slide are, I suppose, excellent infrastructure, road, rail, gas pipelines, and we sit on the heart of a thing called the Keith Kilkenny lineament, which is some of the best geology, and there's a number of multiple or multi-million ounce gold deposits, and we hold a central strategic land position about 1,000 square K in the heart of that district. It's also a very competitive region. There'll be some of you in the room know there's been multiple takeovers in those mines around us. Most recently, I suppose, Genesis Minerals with St Barbara, Dacian, that kind of thing, all sort of passing into one control. Strengths on that slide, I suppose we've kept a very tight share base since listing in that 4 years, and we've done that by a very efficient discovery cost per ounce. For every metre we've drilled, we've added 9.5 ounces of gold. And if you do the maths on that, about a drilling dollar is about $150 a metre for the RC, the type we're doing, and 9.5 ounces of gold is a bit better. The institutional register that we hold puts us in a really strong position, with about sort of 40–50% of the register large North American shareholders. Particularly, they understand this type of deposit that we have here. It's very typical of deposits you see in the US. And we've recently released our preliminary economic assessment, and you can see the graph there between company valuation and project valuation, which I think represents a very good EV per resource ounce, so, or a good buying opportunity. The deposit itself sits in a single, simple pit shell. So compared to some of our peers with similar asset bases, all our gold is in the one spot in a big, low strip pit. The stripping ratio on that pit is only 1.5 to 1, so the amount of waste we've got to move to get to that ore is very low and arguably world class. And we'll have a look at some of these similar deposits elsewhere. Sticks out of the ground, and it's a virgin deposit. It hasn't yet been touched. And you really are looking at, I guess, the ore and what you might see that pit floor at the moment there. The dimensions are not too dissimilar to the previous cutback on the Kalgoorlie super pit. The other thing that makes this work, as well as some very nice mining economics, is a very simple process metallurgy. It's one of the cleanest ores I've ever seen. No carbon, no copper, no arsenic. Very low cyanidation characteristics. All the gold's in grains there, you can see in that little video, which is like an MRI of the drill core. And I suppose importantly, some excellent gravity gold recovery characteristics, but most importantly for us, heap leach characteristics. Which means we can simply crush this rock without grinding it up and using a lot of energy and get the majority of the gold out at a very, very low cost. And that really sets this deposit apart. So if we go back to the mining, low strip, low cost, low processing cost, it's a very different beast. These are the leach curves. So the important thing to take away from this is there's 4 or 5 rock types across the deposit there, and just about every grade of this deposit that we might care to come across. And it doesn't matter what we do, the gold comes out in a very consistent manner. And again, that translates to, I suppose, predictability and low, simple processing cost. And if you looked at that graph for other deposits similar to us in the US, you might see a real spread of those curves, whereas we end up with a very sort of predictable, it's like baking a cake with a good chef and a good recipe. You're going to end up with a beautiful sort of product. Interestingly, I suppose for a 1.84 million ounce resource, one of the things we're really sort of proud of is when we've put the economics around this deposit, we've converted a large amount of it. So from 1.8 million ounces to 1.6 or just over. A very similar pit shell and a very similar strip ratio. I think this was about 1.46, just slightly lower. And again, a very sort of flat, consistent grade curve and tonnage curve throughout the year, and the ability to produce about 123,000 ounces per annum from this pit. One of the reasons this works, if we look in cross-section, I love this picture because it shows just how simple this is going to be on the pit floor. You think about that ore zone there are places where it will be about 200 metres wide. So one of the things we can do is we can use very big equipment, so we don't have selective mining. We're pretty much taking the entire thing. You can see the strip, the white material in there is very low. But importantly, on that pit floor, we're not going to have geologists chasing skinny little ore zones or small equipment. These are big buckets, 70-ton face shovels. And again, that translates to one guy moving the levers on a 10-ton bucket or one guy moving the levers on a 70-ton bucket. Again, it pushes that unit cost down. These are 10-metre benches. And again, it's about that simple processing and scheduling. And the pit shells on there, you can even see, you know, in the first couple of years, strip ratio is even lower. Quite a lot to take in on that diagram, but the important part is this is a heap leach circuit. 46% of the world's gold is produced by heap leach. So this is not rocket science. It's not common here in Australia. But there's nothing, what we say, unconventional about that particular circuit. It's simply crush the rock, put it on a pile, pour some cyanide over the top, and collect the fluid and the gold within it. Without all that cost of milling or building a big mill or the energy that goes with it. Again, a lower cost process. And we are using HPGR, which is high pressure grinding roller crushing technology, which is now a real advantage used at mines like Boddington, Tropicana, and very much up-to-date technology. Capital cost, I guess that picture of that plant, which is a 3D render of what we have. I guess the thing I'd like to point out is one of these plants has just been built in Kalgoorlie and commissioned last year, pretty much exactly the same circuit by a company called CPC. So the point on the costs there, not forgetting this is a 10 million tonne per annum plant. This is a very large plant, I suppose slap bang up to date and local in WA, and I think very, very realistic. All-in sustaining cost, just referring back to, I think, Van Eck and that 1,300 US, if we convert that into Australian dollars, this project and the costing that we've done stacks up very nicely against that at about 1,857, so possibly even ahead of that 1,300 mark, so I was glad. And there's a picture of that big sort of face shovel equipment that just doesn't quite do it justice until you stand alongside it. These are the project economics. I suppose we talk about free cash flow there. Importantly, I suppose a project NPV of about 390 million, a strong payback, 30% IRR, and done in about 2.4 years. At a base case, much below the gold price at this point, and at today's gold price, even more compelling economics. So I particularly like those people in the audience that are gold bulls, and perhaps we'll have a look at a sensitivity chart on where that could go next. So quite a robust project, and I think probably the key point here is really leverage to that gold price change, if positive or negative. But if positive, a really nice project. If negative, I still think because of its cost structure, we've got a lovely place to be. For those of you in the audience who saw our $300 million capital bill and our current $30 million market cap, how am I going to get from 30 million to 300 million to build it? Good question. The beautiful thing about the deposit is it does sit out of the ground And we have in 3 places, 1, 2, 3, grade control drilled the deposit. And we have a concept called a pilot plant scale concept or a phase 1 concept, where we've actually gone and grade control drilled this thing to really measure the gold and convert it into measured. And we're doing studies at the moment where we're looking at, say in that little red pit there you can see in the middle, there's about 1 million tons or about $45 million worth of gold. And at the moment, you know, best sort of studies, we might get that out of the ground for around 20 million. Once that I suppose that's the process that we did to actually measure that gold, and I suppose some fantastic intersections, and I suppose importantly, excellent reconciliation on the actual deposits. And when we've gone in and grade controlled it, there's a high level of confidence that this thing is actually there. But we've also approached it like a definitive feasibility study where we've done the MET in the middle of the pit with diamond drilling, we've done geotech, and from a company risk perspective, we've really done our homework. The design concept, I suppose, also builds in as a sort of capital point of view. You can see on this diagram, which is the big project, the big 300 million, within that, the pilot plant process has been built in as well. And we're looking at the tiny little pit there, the little pads and the little leach ponds, which can ultimately be offset against the big project. Once that's built, if we think about those 3 grade control areas, that can also become part of the company's capital journey, both in terms of cash flow and also offset against its capital structure. So there is a sort of unique opportunity here to really stage this project and get it rolling at quite a small scale, quite cheaply. Within the deposit itself, I suppose the other thing about that pilot plant pit, which you can see on the slide there, is we did take the opportunity to give it a nice flat bottom, but we still drilled it down another 80 or 90 metres. As part of that phased approach, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. There are some beautiful high-grade shoots that still exist within this system that have come out as we've grade controlled it. And I expect, as a geologist always does, that I think we're going to see more of these. Despite the fact that we're approaching this as a big tonnage, low-grade thing, you know, these opportunities do exist within it, and there's probably a number of junior companies that would dive for the sort of intersections that we see inside those chutes there. And I think the scale of this thing gets lost on most people. You can see the big pit there. We're not done. All our exploration so far has been ounces per cubic metre in any given pit, so the value of that per cubic metre of dirt moved. There's some beautiful lead intersections up to the north there, sort of 10 at 10 type intersections, which will ultimately require infill drilling. And in just about every direction, we see opportunity. This bubble graph shows the ounces, the grade, and importantly, we're here in terms of grade, scale, strip ratio, recovery on a global comparative level with other companies actually in production. And I think with the exploration potential, the dream is to move up towards some of those big bubbles you see on the right. Beyond that, don't forget there's 1,000 square kilometres of ground package sat around Apollo Hill itself. The picture you see there is a gold anomaly which is 40 kilometres long and 20 kilometres wide, has 14 prospects in it so far. About 50–60% of the package still needs to be drilled. That's a drill anomaly, that's not geochemistry. So lots of exploration upside and opportunity, even on our own ground package. Pathway to production, I suppose. There's 2 scales here. There's the pilot plant scale, which we're permitting and designing with detail at the moment. There's the big project, which the PEA is out with. So you'll see activity on the exploration front, activity on the pilot scale front, and a PFS study on the big project as we really go for that prize. And that's it. Thank you very much. That's my 15 minutes.